I brought some handouts for you just so you have something in writing. So I probably won't flip through the PowerPoint. I'll just kind of go through what's in there, and I'll kind of follow the order of what's in there. But just kind of give you a little bit of rundown of what's going on, or probably more accurately, what has happened in Lansing, and then kind of where we see things going for the early part of 2024. So the legislature, they are done voting for the year. They actually ended their legislative year, their calendar year, officially November 14th, but their last day of taking votes was on November 9th. So, and actually this year, pretty historic year. There's a whole lot of things that happened this year for the first time ever, or in a number of years in the legislature. But ending on November 14th this year was the earliest that the legislature adjourned since 1968. So, a very long time ago that, that they traditionally their legislative calendar follows pretty much the school year, where they go in January and they work up to about spring break, and they're gone for spring break, come back and they go to about the middle of June, they take off for the summer, come back after Labor Day, and then typically work until the middle of the middle of December, and then they're done for the year. This year, as I said, they ended up ending on November 14th officially as the last day of adjournment for the calendar year. So I guess it's important to know two main reasons why they adjourned when they did. First, the main reason why they adjourned, throughout the course of the year, a lot of the legislative pieces that they passed were high Democratic priorities. So the Michigan Legislature in 2022, the last election year, completely flipped, where we are now 100% controlled by the Democratic Party, where 6 years ago in 2016 we were 100% controlled by the Republicans. Now Democrats control the entire legislature, both the House and the Senate. They control the governor's office, they control the Supreme Court, they control it all. So first time in 40 years that they've had this total control of state government. So they spent really the bulk of the year doing a lot of what the Senate Majority Leader has called 40 years of pent-up policy items that they have on their agenda. They spent the year getting those high-level things done. So as they went through the calendar year of doing some of these high Democratic priorities, which they did not have bipartisan support because they're all very political, very Democratic priorities, a couple of the bills that went through did not get immediate effect throughout the process. So typically if a bill does not have immediate effect, it does not go into effect until the legislature adjourns for that calendar year. So again, if they don't typically adjourn until the middle of December, 90 days after that adjournment would mean sometime middle of March to the end of March, beginning of April. One of the bills that they ended up passing this year that did not have immediate effect was a change to Michigan's presidential primary election. The traditional date of the presidential primary here in Michigan is usually the second or third Tuesday of March. Well, the legislation they passed earlier this year changed it to February 27th, meaning if they broke when they traditionally do the middle of December, that the election would not be able to go into effect because the law hadn't been passed yet, technically. So they had to adjourn prior to that in order for the 90 days to set in. So that's why they picked November 14th to end. The 90-day clock then starts, and then that means that bill goes into effect sometime in the middle of the month of February. So prior to that February 27th election. So that's kind of reason one. There's also a couple of tax bills out there they passed earlier this year where they repealed the retirement tax, and they also changed the earned income tax credit for working families. They increased that. Those bills did not get an immediate effect either. They wanted those to go into effect prior to tax season, so they didn't want people to fill out their taxes and then have to go back and amend them. So those also go into effect prior to tax season. And then also the other package that did not get an immediate effect this year was the gun reform legislation that was passed prior to the summer. So that goes into effect sooner rather than later as well. So that's kind of part one of why they ended when they did. Part two would be in Michigan, in the legislature, we have a couple of key numbers. We have 38 state senators. Right now, Democrats, with their new majority, have a 20-18 majority in the Michigan Senate. In order to pass a bill in the Michigan Senate, you need 20 votes. So they have the bare minimum. In the Michigan House, we have 110 House members. Democrats have a 56-54 majority in the Michigan House. In order to pass a bill in the Michigan House, you need one more than 50%, which is 56. They had, and I'm sure you're aware of this, they had 2 Democratic members that ran for mayoral positions. Well, they both won on November 7th. Kevin Coleman ran for the mayor of the city of Westland, which is in Wayne County, and then Lori Stone ran for the mayor of the city of Warren, which is in Macomb County. As I said, they both won, meaning the week after November 7th, they vacated their House seats, which means the majority of the Michigan House is no longer 56-54, it's 54-54. In order to pass a bill with 54-54, you need 55 votes, meaning you need some kind of cooperation. There's not tons and tons of that in Lansing. So essentially, it's kind of grinded things to somewhat of a halt. So that's kind of part two of why they ended when they did, just because they don't have a functional majority of either party in the Michigan House. So they ended up deciding to end their legislative votes for the calendar year. So the legislature will not return to Lansing until January 10th, unless for some reason the governor called a special legislative session, has them come back, where if she did that, they could only address the items that the governor would outline in that special session, but do not anticipate her doing that, just again, given the makeup of the current legislature. So from a functional standpoint, what does that mean with the House being at 54-54? So a couple of weeks ago, the governor did call for special elections for those 2 House seats. So the primary election is going to be on January 30th, and then the general election for those House seats will be April 16th. So essentially, the House will be at a 54-54 split majority until probably the 3rd week of April, which means not a whole lot is going to happen the first probably quarter of the calendar year 2024. Now, under 54-54, Joe Tate, who is from the Detroit area, is still the Speaker of the House. He does not lose his speakership. There's no co-speakership arrangement, and Democrats still have full control of all the committees in the Michigan House, so that does not change. So I think the good thing for them from a functioning standpoint would be typically the first quarter of the calendar year in Lansing is pretty much focused on the budget, the appropriations process. So you're going to see in January, the end of January, the governor will come out and do her State of the State address. First week of February, the governor will do her FY25 executive budget presentation, where she talks about what she would like to see in the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And then typically you'll see the legislature focus. They will do all of their budget work through the committee process. So the House will work on their budget recommendations, the Senate will work on their budget recommendations, but they do that through committees. So meaning there's not going to be a ton of votes on the House floor anyway. So that, I think that kind of helps them out in this 54-54 quagmire they find themselves under. Typically that budget process will go up until about spring break or so, which kind of gets us around that April timeframe. And then again, you may see some votes come out of the Michigan House, from January 10th until the middle of April or so. My guess, if that does happen, it would be the Speaker, the Minority Leader coming together and saying, hey, we have some members that have some legislative priorities. They're not political, they're not controversial. Can we have, some votes this week, next week, where we can move some of these bills because we want to get some of this stuff just moved through the legislative process. So you could see them put together votes maybe a couple times a month where they move some stuff out of the House during that time frame. Now, the Senate is still fully functional. They can continue to do what they're doing over there, but the House just may be at a standstill, which from my perspective is fine. It's less less stuff for myself to do and others like myself. But I think that's kind of how things will probably play out the first part of next year, kind of given the political dynamics and things like that. So again, 2024 also, you're all well aware, is going to be an election year. It'll be a presidential election year. In the state of Michigan, the only group that's going to be on the ballot will be the Michigan House. So the Senate's not on the ballot, the governor's not on the ballot. It'll only be the Michigan House. So again, I think it'll be, in their best interest to try to work together as much as possible. But I kind of see things playing out once they get back up to full strength, the Democrats, and both those seats are very Democratic, so I do think that they'll win both those seats. Once they get back up to 56, 54, then you'll see them move the budgets through the House, and really it's going to be probably the third week of April until probably the second week of June is really going to be them doing whatever they're going to do to get done, because after that, they're going to go on summer break, and then they're going to go campaign, and then basically anything that doesn't get done before that will probably be pushed off until lame duck is essentially how I think it'll probably work out. So that's kind of what may happen here early part of next year. So there were a number of things that did happen in this fall legislative time period. So the legislature did come back the day after Labor Day, and then they ended their voting on November 9th. So what exactly did they do? One of the slides you have in there from me, the governor did, I think it's maybe in the second or third page, the governor did a what's next address. It was on August 30th of what some of her legislative priorities were going to be. So it was a Reproductive Health Act, it was clean energy, it was had to do with there was election integrity. There are a number of things that she outlined. There was a prescription drug affordability board. Those are some of the things that you saw the legislature at a high level really tackle during that September to November period. Now, there were a number of things that actually impacted our membership across the state. So some of the bills that impacted you folks and our other CMHs, PHPs, and providers across the state would be things like mental health parity. We have two different bills out there in the legislature on mental health parity. So we have Senate Bill 27. Senate Bill 27 is a bill that simply codifies the federal mental health parity law. So back under the George W. Bush administration, which was 15 plus years ago or more, 20 years ago, they passed mental health parity at the federal level. Michigan never passed its own mental health parity law. So Senate Bill 27 essentially just puts the federal law into Michigan law. So I guess for whatever reason, if Congress decided to say, boy, mental health parity is a bad idea, let's get rid of it, we would at least have those protections in state law. So Senate Bill 27 did pass the Michigan Senate back in the middle of October, was sent over to the House Insurance Committee, and is still in the House Insurance Committee. The House Insurance Committee did not meet again before they broke on November 9th. So that bill's over in the House Insurance Committee. We'll see. My guess is that bill will move at some point this year. Insurers are now miraculously coming around saying that's a good idea to do something there, and I think it's for another reason. The other bill we have on mental health parity is House Bill 4707. This is the one, if you get action alerts from me, would be the one that you saw a number of action alerts. House Bill 4707 essentially builds on the federal mental health parity law, where in a couple of main areas. One, on medical necessity, it talks about medical necessity being determined by an actual behavioral health or substance use disorder professional, where the recommendations they make on medical necessity is actually based on some kind of science. It's based on actual real criteria, ASAM criteria, other science-based criteria, where it's not arbitrarily set by the insurance company as to what coverage you're able to get. It talks about medical necessity being based on real criteria when you look at scope, duration, length, services, things of that nature. So a lot of good stuff on medical necessity. And then also the other key change would be on in-network, out-of-network. So If you're not able to get your services provided by your insurer in-network, if you have to go out-of-network, the insurer cannot charge you any more for out-of-network than they do in-network. Again, I don't believe that 4707 impacts the people served by St. Clair County CMH or any of our CMHs. It's targeted for people that have employer-based or commercial-based insurance, and I think it's pretty life-altering changes for those individuals. I do think also there could be a CCBHC implication to 4707 where when we talk about if someone has commercial-based insurance, what you all as a CCBHC get reimbursed for, if 4707 is passed, if it expands that scope of commercial insurance, it says you have to cover a full scope, a full duration of services, I think that ultimately helps fill in some of the gaps for the commercial folks that you would serve in your CCBHC capacity. So just kind of another aspect to that. House Bill 4707 was on the House agenda. It passed committee earlier this year. It's on the House floor. It was supposed to be passed out of the House the week we were up in Traverse City at our conference. So that was like the week of October 21, 22. It was pulled off the agenda that week. This is in a little bit of irony here, this is the number one bill that Blue Cross Blue Shield and the insurers are targeting. They are 100% opposed to this, doing whatever they can to kill this bill. Unlike last year at this time, when we were fighting the Shirkey legislation, something they were passing, we were fighting. Now we're supporting something they're fighting, and you see where I'm getting at. However, so it was pulled off the agenda. And it was really pulled off the agenda not because no Republicans would vote for it, because there's still a handful of Democrats that are on the fence with this. And again, this is for no other reason other than this is a very powerful special interest just saying stay off this, don't vote for it. I do think if they put this up, when they put this up for a vote, I think that'll pass. It'll get bipartisan support, but they're doing whatever they can to keep it off from going up for a vote in the Michigan House. So the sponsor of this is Representative Felicia Brabeck, who was at our conference, huge supporter of ours. I'm actually meeting with her next week, talking about a strategy to how do we get this moved in 2024. So again, this is something we're going to continue to push on next year. It's going to be a very high priority to move this along. My guess is if we're able to move this, it'll be in lame duck, would be my best guess. We also had a package of bills that moved on November 9th, the last day of voting out of the House on telehealth services. So there are 4 bills in the package. One of the bills essentially made sure that behavioral health and substance use disorder was included in the telehealth package. That those are services that do qualify for telehealth services. The other bills then essentially require that reimbursement for telehealth be at the same level as in-person. Again, the insurers, for the same reasons as they were fighting the parity bills, have been opposed to the telehealth package, have been trying to delay this, slow it down. They've done a pretty good job. However, we were able to get this out of the House the last day of voting before they broke. So the bills now have been sent over to the Senate Health Policy Committee, Senator Hertel's committee, so you're one of your senators over here. So that's something I would think that the Senate would be able to move on that early next year to get that telehealth package through. So I think that's a little bit of good news. We finally saw some movement on those bills. A bit of good news, and I kind of keep checking to see if the governor signed this or not, thanks to a lot of the folks here in this room. Senate Bill 227, the bill that I kind of call common sense legislation that impacts kids' residential settings, that allows for emergency physical management, or the way it's outlined in the bill, therapeutic de-escalation for kids-based residential services, that allows for those type of treatments. That did pass the Senate earlier this year. The House did pass it, sent it to the governor. So I think any day now the governor will sign it. She's been signing bills the last week and a half or so. So I think any day, and once I get an update, I'll make sure I email Deb on that, because it's really the leadership from from you folks here in St. Clair that really brought this to Senator Lauers, that allowed him to push that through. Again, I mean, you're all very well versed in that, but I mean, again, I think this goes to the continuum of care issue that you see around kids-based services and, the lack of inpatient settings. You need some place in the pipeline for kids to go, and, not being able to do any kind of emergency physical management it does not work. And I mean, you've had a number of providers that have either lost their license or just said, forget it, I'm not going to provide that service at all. Again, hopefully this fixes that, or at least allows for additional options. Director Hertel was very supportive of this. This also brought in the PRTFs, the psychiatric residential treatment facilities, and also CCIs. But Director Hertel testified in both the House and Senate committees on Senate Bill 227. So again, I anticipate the governor signing this any day. Did reach out to her staff last week, and again, I think it's in her pipeline of things to sign, and should hear something shortly on that. We also had a couple of bills that were brought up in the House Behavioral Health Subcommittee on the last day they were in session on November 9th around social worker licensure changes. So two bills, 5184, 5185, would eliminate the exam requirement for social workers to become fully licensed when they go from their bachelor's to their master's. We found that the exam for social workers has been a bit of a barrier, and especially, I call it the Bob Sheehan exemption, especially for experienced social workers. The longer you are out of school, the harder it is to pass the exam. So they've done this in a few other states. So we would eliminate the exam as a path to licensure. We would replace it with additional supervision. And then Michigan is already the leading state in the nation as far as the number of hours that social workers need to have in, field study, practice, or whatever you want to call it. It's like 4,000 hours plus another 1,000 hours as they go through their original internship. So they have like 5,000 hours of field study, field practice in social work before they can become fully licensed already. This just eliminates the exam. A number of states have done this. The closest one in proximity to us is Illinois. When Illinois did this, they went from 1 year having 400 available social workers to the next year having 3,000. So we're really hoping, you're all very well aware that workforce is a huge issue. Workforce shortage is a huge issue. Hopefully this helps in that process of freeing up some experienced clinicians that are out there that maybe are not licensed but have been working in the field for a number of years. Again, we think that's very positive. This bill is not going to be a slam dunk by any means. LARA, the state agency that actually does the licensing, as you can imagine, is opposed. They lose a bit of control by eliminating that exam. The group that administers the exam obviously would be opposed, and then other professional groups that have to take exams have some concerns of, well, what the heck, we have to take an exam. Why do social workers get out of this? So I think it's going to be a long push on this, but I think this is something that we're going to continue to work on, and hopefully we can get done yet this year. This is another Representative Braybeck sponsored bill, so very grateful to have her support on that. Another package that Representative Braybeck is supporting would be, she introduced, along with Representative Phil Green, who is from the Thumb area, Republican, two bills on CCBHCs, that they would essentially codify the program into state law. Right now it's in the department regulatory sphere. It's a demonstration project, but this would actually put it into state law, hopefully making it one more step to becoming a permanent program here in the state. Those bills were just introduced prior to the legislature breaking, 5371 and 5372, bipartisan package. They had 26 co-sponsors, both Republicans and Democrats, so hopefully that's something we can see pushed through as well. I'm also hoping to see early next year changes to the Open Meetings Act. We have a couple of bills out there that would allow for remote participation and remote voting for non-elected boards. So I think that would be good. So it would be, if you are a board that is elected, that is compensated, and that allocates public funds, you are not able to participate remotely. So boards of county commissioners, school boards, what have you. But our CMH, PHP boards would qualify. The language in the bill is kind of messy. It's a double negative. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense just in plain English. But I believe that the CMH and PHPs are not elected to boards. So you may have county commissioners on there, but they are not elected to those boards. So we are clear of that barrier. Compensation, if you offer some kind of per diem stipend to board members, I don't think that counts as compensation, but you do allocate public funds. But I believe that, you will qualify for that once that bill does move forward. They had some work groups on it earlier this year, and it's just been a long, slow process where, for whatever reason, the legislature has been very hesitant to pushing out changes to the Open Meetings Act. And they are very much against elected boards being able to participate remotely. So I hope we see some movement on that early next year on the Open Meetings Act change. And then a couple other bills on the legislative front that we did see some action during that fall legislative time would be around substance use disorder. There are a couple of bills, and none of these really moved anywhere, but they were out there. A couple of bills look at naloxone distribution, clears up some gray area in the law that allows for distribution of Narcan, naloxone. A couple other bills that look at harm reduction. They would eliminate any criminal or civil liability for a safe syringe exchange program or fentanyl testing strips. It would remove any kind of liability for agencies that would administer that. And then one that looks at expanding naloxone to other products outside of just Narcan. So those are things out there. We may see some movement on those early next year as well. Outside of the legislative sphere, a couple things I just want to point out quickly that you do have in your packet. One would be October 30th, the department did release their Medicaid health plan rebid. And again, when we're very keen on what's actually in that Medicaid health plan rebid. This is probably the easiest way for the state to privatize the public mental health system, is doing it through that procurement process where they could simply write it into that Medicaid health plan contract of, yes, you're responsible for all behavioral health Medicaid services. Here you go. And you avoid the legislature altogether. They did not do that. Really, the only things in the Medicaid health plan rebid of interest, at least that Bob and I could find off the top of our heads, would be one that requires the health plans to pay for crisis intervention services in hospital emergency departments for non-CMH and PIHP individuals, so something they probably should have been paying for already. And then when we look at mild to moderate services, it was still hard to pinpoint where this is, but we were told for mild to moderate services that it would require the health plans to increase the reimbursement for office-based psychotherapy or psychiatry. So right now, the mild to moderate services, the reimbursement that they offer our CMHs don't cover your costs. So typically you don't do it. If you do it, then you're essentially doing it at a loss because you can't charge Medicaid twice. This would require them to up that reimbursement amount. So a couple of at least decent things that came out of the rebid. So the process of the rebid, the health plans have a little bit of time here to send questions to the state. State will answer those questions, and then the health plans will submit their full proposals to the state. Early 2024, the state will make their determination of who's going to get the health plan contract. Then those contracts go into effect October 1 of 2024, so beginning of FY25. We also anticipate seeing in early 2024 an RFP come out for the dual eligible special needs plan, so the new DSNP. Again, that will not carve in behavioral health. Behavioral health will still be outside of that, separate. It does carve in the long-term care piece of it. There's still a fee for service that brings them into managed care, but it does carve out the behavioral health piece. So that's something also in 2024 to keep an eye on. The last thing I just wanted to mention, something that you'll hear probably quite a bit about in 2024, especially through the budget process, would be Medicaid redetermination. So I put in here some slides that the department gave to the legislature. So department staff testified in front of the House MDHHS Budget Subcommittee on November 1 of how their redetermination process is going. So these are some of the slides that I took from there. High-level takeaway from their slides would be Michigan's Medicaid program is over 3 million people now for the first time ever. From when COVID started to early 2023, Medicaid grew by like over 800,000 people. We do know, during that time, the redetermination was paused, so they weren't able to go and redetermine people on a yearly basis. We do know a number of those people that were added, most likely are not going to qualify for Medicaid moving forward. So again, our fear would be, our system is paid. The more people on Medicaid, the more money we get. If a ton of people drop off, that's less money that goes to the overall system. So as they go through this redetermination process, we want to make sure that they are accurate, that we get as many people redetermined and signed up that qualify for Medicaid as possible. So one of the slides they have on there would be the first, they looked at the first 3 months, 4 months or so of when they started their redetermination. I think they looked at 750,000 people or so. About 50,000 people were ineligible from that first batch. And then another 225,000 people were dropped off of Medicaid for procedural reasons. Essentially, they didn't send their paperwork in. So I think the state is still trying to work and get those folks to turn that paperwork in. But that's an alarming number of people in the first batch of you've got 200,000 or 300,000 people that are already coming off the rolls. And the tough part for you all, for our members across the state, on a Medicaid basis, out of that 3 million people, we serve 300,000, 350,000 people maybe. So those are the people that you do a pretty good job of identifying them, to re-up them, to get them to sign up again. You're basically counting on all the other community partners, the health plans, to sign up all these other people. I mean, you don't know all the people in your community that are on Medicaid outside of the people that you touch. So if community partners don't do a good job, health plans don't do a good job, we see a dramatic drop. That's going to mean some real financial issues, and we've already started to see kind of the precursor to some of those financial problems already. Again, our message to the legislature is going to be, if we see a dramatic drop, you need to do real-time adjustments to rates. We cannot have this, let's wait 6 months, 9 months, and then readjust rates, because, boy, we'll be in a real financial mess. And I think the other part of redetermination that's going to be incredibly important would be, what bucket do people get redetermined in? We had an issue when Healthy Michigan started, that we saw a tremendous amount of people go from DAB, disabled, aged, and blind, kind of traditional Medicaid, get moved over to Healthy Michigan. One of the good things for individuals in Michigan, when we expanded Medicaid, the expanded Medicaid benefit in Michigan is the exact same if you're on Healthy Michigan or you're on traditional Medicaid. However, the reimbursement for our members is drastically different. If you're a Healthy Michigan person, our PHP CMHs get reimbursed about $40 per month per person. If you're on regular Medicaid, it's like $380 per member per month. We had a ton of people essentially go from regular Medicaid to Healthy Michigan during the early years of Healthy Michigan. It was like almost $100 million loss across the state. We had to go to the department. We had to fight tooth and nail with them. I think we got about $60 million back from them that, oh yeah, we made a mistake. Here you go. That's the fear during this redetermination process when you have so many people now going through redetermination. I guarantee you at the end of this, the state is going to say, look at what a great job we did. We enrolled all of these people, even though they may be re-enrolling them into different Medicaid buckets, and all of a sudden financially we go back and look at that, oh boy, we've got a real problem, because we were getting $300+, now we're getting something significantly less. I think that's going to be something that's going to be, we really need to keep an eye on. I'm going to have some early conversations with the budget chairs in the House and the Senate on, as you go through this redetermination, have the department come in, we need to make sure that we're keeping an eye on what buckets people get dumped into. So I think that's something that's going to be hugely important for 2024 as we look at that. And I guess the last thing I'll say, and I have them in the slides, we as through the association, 2 grants from the Health Endowment Fund. One on the social worker licensure piece, it was like $300,000. We're working with NASW and a few other stakeholders, not to lobby on behalf of that, but basically to do all the background work, the research on why this is important to make this change. So I think that's good news. The Health Endowment Fund bought into that, the workforce component of that. So hopefully that provides us some good working data that then we can then go to the legislature and say, look, this is a change we need to make. Then the other one would be something that's near and dear to all of our hearts would be administrative burden, that we got another grant for like $300,000 or $400,000 that we're working with public sector consultants to identify unneeded, unnecessary, bureaucratic red tape, administrative burden, whatever you want to call it, of how do we get rid of some of the non-value added stuff that actually don't benefit people's lives whatsoever. The department is part of that process, although we had kind of an initial meeting with them, and apparently they're doing everything they can already do on administrative burden. So, they're working on it, but, we're going to continue to push this, and if nothing else comes out of this, we'll at least have some kind of a formal report from a unbiased third party that can say, look at all the junk we have to do that doesn't add value. Now let's figure out how we get rid of it.